Hey guys, it's me, Tove from Tono's Everything on Instagram and at GTA Sportsplex, bringing back to you another legal edition podcast with my guest. I know him very well, and I guess a lot of you probably do too. If you watched the last podcast, it's Emilio Bisceglia from Bisceglia and Associates, a law firm in the city of Vaughan. Here, Emilio specializes in litigation, and today we're going to be talking about construction and how COVID-19 has impacted construction here in the city of Toronto and Ontario. Emilio, welcome back. Thanks for being on.
Thank you. Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
Good. I'm glad that we were able to bring you back on because we have been bombarded with questions since you were on last week. Last week we discussed insurance and small business insurance, and a lot of people actually ended up emailing you, and you've been working with some people to try and help them out in terms of their insurance policies. And, obviously pandemic coverage seems to be a part of quite a few policies and not others, unfortunately. But I know that you were able to reach out and help a lot of people. How's it been going in terms of the insurance companies responding to you?
It's slow progress. It's going to take time. If you have pandemic coverage, it's a lot easier. Then it's just an issue of how much money you're getting. If you don't have the coverage, then it's more challenging, but we're working with people and we'll see what we can do.
Okay,
we'll
perfect.
To work with them, do everything we can.
Awesome. So just before we start, Emilio, you know that last week we had over 100 people on the call, and we had a lot of people that unfortunately we lost due to technical difficulties. But, a lot of people reached out to me later and wanted to reach out to you and ask you questions. And we've had people from, that we knew actually 30 years ago. We had Anna, who lived across the street from us at Jane and Wilson. So I want to give her a shout out. It was her birthday this week. So thanks for watching, Anna. Shout out to you and Jane and Wilson and the Eps and Downs crew. But this week we want to talk about construction. Tell us about what is happening in the construction industry here in Ontario since COVID-19 and what the government has done to impact the industry.
Let me start with a big announcement that came up over the Easter long weekend. So late into the day on Thursday night, the government of Ontario has indicated they're lifting the emergency order as it relates to the Construction Act. So they had suspended all limitation periods back on March 16th when things were in the heat of the uncertainty and worry. Late on Thursday, they've indicated that they're lifting it, and they're lifting it effective Thursday, which is Thursday, April 16th. They're giving everybody a few days to get ready. But what that means is the clock is running again. So if you're a construction company, if you have lien rights, it is being lifted effective Thursday, April 16th, which means you have to start, if you want to enforce your rights, if you have a lien that you need to register, the clock starts to run again. It's a 30-day extension, so it brings you back right where you were back in March of 2016. This is so new that the government has still not issued the wording for the order. We're hoping that we can get it very, very soon, but right now they've given us an advance warning of a few days to get ready, so we're ready to go come Thursday, April 16th. So if you're a construction company, you have to sort of start getting ready because the suspension of limitation is over as it relates to the Construction Act only. Everything else is still in effect, but the Construction Act, they've given us a 3 or 4 day notice, and we're back on effective Thursday, April 16th.
So, Miller, why do you think they've done this now? Why the timing now?
There was some uncertainty with the last order they made. A lot of banks and other companies weren't making construction draws because it was suspended, so they weren't sure if they were going to go ahead and make the draw, for example, on April 1st, whether somebody could come back 2 or 3 weeks later and put a lien on. So what this does is it's sort of, the idea behind it is to get the cash flow rolling so that people can make advances, pay their trades. But what it also means is if you have a lien rights and you haven't been paid, you've got to register, you're going to lose them. So if you had a lien right that was going to expire, for example, back on March 20th or something along those lines, it may have been suspended during that time period, but it won't come effective April 16th. And we'll see the actual wording. I think they're going to give us a grace period, probably a 30-day grace period to register. We don't know that yet, but what we do know is you better be ready come Thursday, April 16th.
So, Millie, just to clarify and recap, the government hadn't halted all construction, right? They were permitting construction. If a project was like 80% completed, they allowed you to proceed, right? There were some specific details in that.
Yeah, they did it in 2 stages. When they listed the first list of essential services, there was a lot of construction or more construction allowed. On April 4th, they issued a minimized or reduced list of construction projects. That was greatly reduced. Basically, if you were a infrastructure project, you were allowed to proceed. If you were a healthcare project, you were allowed to proceed. If you were a residential project, you were out of the ground. If you had a permit or you were in progress somewhere above the grounds, you were also allowed to continue on with that. Other than that, essentially everything has been stopped for construction after April.
So would that include, home renovation companies, contractors, smaller contractors completing a basement or something like that?
Yes, it would have. So unless you had a permit already and you were out of the ground, that was essentially halted back on April 4th. And there's a lot of complications. It's not just that. I think we touched on it about it beforehand. If you had COVID-19 on a site, then something else kicked in. Then the Ministry of Labor showed up. You had to report that there was COVID-19. You had to take a bunch of steps. So it's not as simple as whether you're an essential service or not, but at least it allowed you the ability to proceed. So that you're still, even though the limitation periods are being lifted in terms of the Construction Act, the list of essential services is still there. So that hasn't been changed. It's still a restricted amount of construction that can continue.
So we were hearing a lot in the media that construction workers in general were fearful of being on the work site, right? And they were saying that there was potential for them to contract the coronavirus on the work site. What have you heard from your clients in terms of? Go ahead.
It's a very difficult situation. So really what it did is, if you're a general contractor who's responsible for the site, it turned you into or required you to become an infectious disease expert in a matter of days. You had to come up with a plan in order to keep that site safe. It was very, very difficult in order to do that. If you're a subcontractor, you had generals pushing you to continue to go on the site, but you still have to keep your men safe. And it's a challenge. It was very, very difficult. It has worked on some sites. It hasn't worked on other sites. We have clients on the Crosstown project where they're building the subway. That's sort of been a problematic site. There's been a few COVID-19s already reported. There's condominium sites that they've had it reported, and those sites are being shut down. So it's a significant challenge. It's trying to keep the workplace safe, which is not easy, and trying to comply with the requirements of the Ministry of Labor, the government, and all sorts of things. So it's certainly been difficult.
Yeah. So Emilio, in terms of, you just mentioned a good point, condominium sites. A lot of people in the last week and a lot of my clients who buy pre-construction condos received letters from their builders saying that, there was a delay because of the pandemic. Under Terry-on warranty, there is a stipulation that if there is some kind of act of God or pandemic, that they could delay. What does this mean for these condo sites and these projects?
So it's different things for different people. If you were getting possession over the last month or so, Terry-on issued a advisory on March 16th, basically with what was going to happen in terms of taking possession of your property during the emergency order. So it certainly gives a sort of a step-by-step in terms of notices, etc. If you were not in the ground yet, then that means your project's not starting. So there's a delay, and then you have to go to your Terry-on amendment to see whether or not there's significant time for the builder to extend it. If your project is underway, it's still going to cause problems. So we touched upon this last week. Before you'd have 10 people in the elevator going up to work on the floor. Now maybe you can put 2 people in the elevator. So in order to get a floor loaded, it takes you an hour and a half. And then once you're there, you can't have the same number of work people. So for sure, there's going to be delays. The Terry-on amendment lists everybody's dates in terms of outside dates when it's delayed and when it can be delayed, and that's a very complicated form. You've got to go through it to see how far the builder can extend it and what rights you have. But that's all. There's a lot of problems on various different levels. If you're the sub-trade, you've got to give notices to your general that you can't comply because you can't get your men on site. So it's a very challenging time for everybody.
So one thing's for certain, there's going to be delays across the board.
I think absolutely. There is, whether your project is at a stop, in which case it's the entire time during the emergency order, nothing's happening, or if you are deemed essential and they can still continue, it's not progress as it was in the past. You have productivity of maybe 30%, because that's really all you can do in terms of workforce to work safely and requiring that you carry out all of the infectious control issues that we have on sites. So
what are you saying to your clients, your contractor clients, builders, developers? What are you saying to them right now?
So the first thing we said right when this hit back in the middle of March, we said the first thing you got to do is go back and read your contract. So if you're a subcontractor, you're a general, as it relates to your owner, do you have a force majeure clause? Should you be sending notices of delay? That's the first. Most contracts do have a provision that you got to send notice of delay. We told everybody, send your letter out there, say that for sure we're going to be delayed. We're going to work with you. We're going to try and mitigate it. We don't know if we can continue or not, but it's going to be delayed for sure. There may be extra costs, maybe an extension. We're giving you notice of that. And that's an evolving notice. So that what we sent out the first week on March 16th, March 20th, that period of time has changed over time. Now at some sites we're saying, listen, we really can't proceed unless we have sort of some protection that we're sure that we're not going to have COVID-19 spreading. We may not be able to continue at all, even though legally it's an essential service and we can continue to construct. And the crosstown one is a good example. While they are permitted because it's an infrastructure project, the project has had people who've tested positive for COVID-19. The sites have to be shut down until they can get the situation under control. And the only thing that's for sure is there's delay and there's additional costs. That's certain.
So these additional costs, are they going to be passed on to end users? How do you see this playing out?
Yeah, so the buyers of your condominium projects, the answer is probably not. Most likely there's nothing in the contracts which will allow them to pass it on as long as the delay is a reasonable period of time. As it relates between the subcontractor and the general contractor and the owners, everybody's going to try and pass those costs on because they're tremendous. So if you've been stopped for 6 weeks or 2 months or 3 months, there's an enormous amount of cost there. Interest on your mortgages, interest on financing. If you have a crane, who's paying the rental when it sits there? If you're a subtrade and you're producing at 30%, your costs are going through the roof, and nobody's working because everybody's worried about getting, infected. People are not eating their lunch in the trailer; they're running to their cars. And that instead of an hour, you're taking 2 hours going to your trailer. You've got washing, you've got different types of washing facilities, sanitizing facilities, enormous costs across the board. And I think as between those players, the owner, the generals, and the subcontractors, there's going to be a discussion, and there may be a lot of litigation as to who's going to bear all these costs. Hopefully, we can avoid it and work cooperatively, but if not, there's a lot of difficulties that are going to pop up.
So it seems like there's a massive trickle-down effect, and basically, at the end of the day, someone's going to end up paying these costs, right? Right now, we don't know who, but at the end of the day, someone's going to have to pay for these delays.
Well, look, what we're telling people, they got to protect themselves. So if you're a subcontractor, if you're a general contractor, we're saying get the notice letters out to your owners, get the notice letters out to your general contractors saying there's going to be costs, we need an extension, and we'll worry about once we have an end to this, which will hopefully be soon, then we can figure out what the situation is and try and come to a resolution. But there's going to be a tremendous amount of cost, and the issue will be how do we divide up that cost.
What does this do to real estate in general? And I mean, in a very broad, general terms. What does this do to real estate? Obviously, it sounds like it's going to have a negative impact. What's your feeling?
Yeah, so certainly sort of after the emergency order was granted, in terms of new transactions, that's come to a halt. I think everybody's sort of wait and see. If you take a look at the last sort of statistics that have come out in terms of new financings that were not in place before the emergency order, that's dropped considerably or almost to nil. If there are existing deals that are still in the pipeline, that were in the pipeline before the emergency order, it appears are still closing, that's still happening. But in terms of real estate, the answer is nobody's buying or nobody's looking at buying, certainly while the emergency order is outstanding, because there's too much uncertainty.
Yeah, and long term, obviously, this is going to have implications on the real estate market here in the GTA, Ontario, and probably across the world. Do you see the prices of real estate, residential, commercial, coming down because of this?
I'm not sure if they're going to come down, but I think the answer is, at least in the short term, they're not going to go up. There's going to be a tremendous amount of cost, and which owners, developers are going to try and pass on to the consumer, and the consumer is going to be worried because they've just gone through a traumatic period. A lot of people have lost their jobs. There's uncertainty. Are we going to have a second wave? Are we going to have a third wave? Am I going to have my job a year from now? And when there's uncertainty, people are not going out and buying a property or going into bidding wars as they did previously. So certainly, I think there's going to be a period of stabilization in terms of real estate prices.
And do interest rates have an impact on any of this? We see interest rates continue to go down. Now, all the banks haven't passed on the Bank of Canada reductions, but do you see dropping interest rates having an impact at all? Does it help the situation?
So look, I think it helps the situation if you've got an existing loan. So if you're out there and you have a mortgage for whatever the period amount is, and if you're at variable rate, your costs are reduced. That's fantastic. But if you're buying a property, I think it doesn't make a difference, because you're going to have that. If you have the choice, am I going to acquire debt? Am I going to acquire this liability? There's uncertainty. The answer is no. Why would I go ahead and put more? It's not an asset. It becomes a liability in these times of uncertainty. Why go ahead and get that uncertainty and liability when you don't have to?
Right, exactly. So I guess this is sort of a new reality when we come out of this in terms of how people do business, especially construction, builders, developers. It's going to be a new world order, because obviously we're not going back to business as usual. How do you see things in general terms, in terms of business getting back to normal? Obviously, you said it's going to take time. The sentiment may be a lot different when people come out of this, because they're going to be cautious. Do you see this being a long-term, drawn-out recession, or could we possibly be going into a depression like a lot of people are talking about?
I think a depression won't happen. Right? There's too much government intervention. We've got a safety net that's created. I don't think that the situation, as it stands now anyway, is anywhere close to a depression. Are we going to have a recession or something along those lines? I'm not certain about that. The amount of money that the government's putting into the system is a huge amount of money, and then it's going to depend how long this takes. If the emergency order is over in May or June, I think it's not likely that we're going to have a recession. I think things will cool. They'll be more stabilized. We'll have a new reality going forward, but I don't think the repercussions will be as dire as people are saying. But everybody's going to be more cautious. Everybody's going to want to have a bigger nest egg. Everybody's going to want to have a cushion, because they're going to basically go back to what our parents said, which is, if you're prepared for a rainy day. A lot of people aren't preparing for a rainy day. We've had a rainy day. You're going to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Do you think the Canadian government is doing enough in terms of programs and, making sure that people at least have some kind of living wage moving forward? Are they doing enough for business, for individuals, for self-employed? I know that in the U.S. there are numerous programs. Every day new programs come out for small business and individuals. We pretty much have just a handful. I know we've got the $40,000 loan for small businesses. We've got the $2,000 a month for commission salespeople. We've got unemployment insurance. But are we doing enough in Canada? Is the federal government doing enough to support our economy and our workforce?
So it's a two-part answer. Firstly, I think they've done a good job thus far. It's only been about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So thus far, I think they've done a good job. Have they done a good job in relation to business and small business? Absolutely not. So if you take a look during the same period of time, 4 weeks in the United States, they've gone gangbusters. So the amount of programs and that they've instituted is tremendously wider. A lot of opportunity. There's going to be a lot of industries which are going to be gone as we know them. If you're in the construction industry, there may be a pause, there may be increased costs, but once the emergency order is lifted, you can go back and you can start doing what they were doing. It's going to be different for other industries. If I was in, for example, the travel industry, if I was in the airline industry, if I was in the hospitality industry, restaurants, a lot of those businesses are not going to come back. There's going to be a high amount of failures in that business. And what the U.S. government is saying is, we're going to give you money to pivot. So let's figure out how you can go to another industry, how you can retool, reformat, and program yourself to do something and succeed. That doesn't exist in Canada. Certainly not yet. I'm hopeful that the government will come up with these programs. We have a great example in the United States. Trillions and trillions of dollars. We don't have that. It's much more limited. We've taken a good first step. I'll concede that, and I applaud the government for taking the first step. But they've got to go the next step. So once this emergency order is lifted, how do we get those businesses which fail, which don't come back? And there's going to be a number of them in retail, hospitality, etc. What do we do with those business owners? What do we do with those people? We got to get them to work. And in order to get them to work, you got to have some sort of programs to give them stimulus and get them going.
Do you see this as a major transformation from an industrial-based economy to a new digital economy? Is there a new reality that people have to get used to? You see these Zoom meetings, every company, every organization, every educational institution, everyone is on Zoom. Is this the new reality? Are we moving away from industrial aged economy to more of a digital age economy? Is this the new reality?
Absolutely. So if you have 25,000 square feet of office space, the reality is everybody's now working at home after a month. Why do you need 25,000 square feet of office space? Maybe you need 5,000 square feet of office space, some meeting space, and some storage. Why do you need space for a large amount of space in retail stores? A lot of these retail stores aren't going to come back. When people are buying on Amazon and they're buying on these other platforms, why are they going to go back, and why are these businesses going to pay a huge amount of rent in malls and strip plazas? It's going to be completely changed. And unless, that's why I say people have to pivot. They've got to see that that's going to be the new reality. It's going to be, we're going to certainly continue to do business. It's going to be a different type of business. This is certain. There's no going back to it. Once you have people learning on Zoom, you have meeting on Zoom. Why are we going to these places? Why are we paying these rents? Why are we spending all this money driving up and down when we can, plug in and have a meeting on 2 minutes notice? So it's going to change for sure. And it'll affect everyone. Landlords, it'll affect if you own an office building, it's going to affect you. If you're a tenant, why are you going to rent all this space? If you're a tenant in a retail mall, do you really need 5,000 square feet, or do you need 1,000 square feet to show some samples and then ship it to people the next day? So it's going to happen. It's happening.
Makes total sense. So from what I hear, obviously, and what I know, there are going to unfortunately be a lot of losers in this situation. And by losers, I mean, like you said, office buildings will be vacant. I think, landlords obviously won't be able to increase commercial rents. Will there be any winners in this? It looks very bleak, but will there be any winners out of this dark scenario that we're in right now?
Absolutely. And the answer is the winners are going to be the people which adapt. So if in the end, if you had a retail operation, you can adapt and do it on a digital platform, you'll succeed. If there's people are still going to need to travel. You just may not need to rent a expensive facility in terms of your travel office or agency. You may have a restaurant. You're going to have a different type of restaurant. Maybe you don't need all that space. You don't need the expensive space. More people may want to order, pick up, delivery. Same with groceries. You may not need a 50,000 square foot store. You may need 25,000 because people are going to be ordering their groceries online. So you can be a winner, but you got to pivot. If you think we're going to go back to where we were before March 15th, the answer is absolutely not. We're going to have a new way of doing business, and the people who are going to be winners are the people who are going to adapt and succeed. And this has gone through history. We've seen this for different reasons. We had world wars, and then people came out and they were different. This is equivalent to that. This is obviously a catastrophe, pandemic, and there can be winners if people are willing to make the change. But if you don't change, then you won't succeed when we're over this.
Fantastic. I think that's great advice. Yeah, you have to be flexible, adaptable, and you have to be determined to succeed in this new reality. And I definitely think we have shifted from an industrial age economy to a digital economy. We see that with the implementation of Zoom, Google Meetings, Google platforms. This is a new age, and people have to adapt. And unfortunately, perhaps older generations, some boomers won't be able to adapt, and they may be forced out of this current economy. But those who are willing to learn new skills will come out on top. And I think, there's tons of new business opportunities that are going to come out of this. Emilio, I know you've been helping people basically pro bono all week. People have been emailing you, asking you business related questions. If there are any contractors, builders, anybody that wants to get in touch with you regarding what's happening right now, where can they reach you?
Same way, we're still essentially operating digitally. So the best way to do it is simply to email us through the website. That's the easiest way.
What's your website address?
It's www.lawtoronto.com, and my own email address is ebisceglia@lawtoronto.com.
Okay, that's amazing. I want to thank you for all the work you've been doing for the community. People have been messaging me, thanking me for having you on, and your knowledge and experience is much appreciated. We're going to try and do this every week. I thank you. Stay healthy, safe, and keep up the great work, okay?
You too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.